Her phone lit up on my nightstand. His name on the screen, her boyfriend, Ryan, glowing in the dark of my apartment. She glanced at it. Then she looked at me.
It's fine. He can wait.
And she reached over, pressed the side button, and turned it face down without a word. That image never left me. Not in the years that followed, not even now, a decade later, sitting at a desk in my 30s with a completely different life. That one gesture, so casual, so deliberate, told me everything about what we were and exactly where it was headed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story starts about 10 years ago, when I was 20 years old and living with the specific confidence of someone who hasn't been wrong about anything important yet. I wasn't a strong student. I got into a mid-level state university a few hours from home. Nothing prestigious, just the school that said yes. My parents, practical and quietly generous, decided that the cramped, overpriced dorm rooms near campus weren't worth the money. So while my friends were packed into double rooms with strangers, I ended up in a one-bedroom apartment nearby on a lease my parents set up. My own front door, my own kitchen, my own space 3 blocks from campus. I didn't fully appreciate it then. I would later. Chapter 1. The Welcome Party. Freshman orientation at a state university is, if you've never been through one, essentially a structured excuse to drink. There might have been icebreaker games. I can't remember. What I remember is the beer arriving early, the upperclassmen moving through the room like they owned it, because they did, and me sitting near the edge of it all, sipping slowly, trying to read the room. That's when she sat down next to me. She appeared out of nowhere and settled in beside me with the casual ease of someone who had never once questioned whether she belonged somewhere. She said I was cute. She laughed before I finished my sentences. She leaned in when she talked, close enough that I caught the scent of something warm and faintly sweet. She was exactly my type in every way I didn't yet have the vocabulary for. Pretty without trying, a little older, the kind of person who made you feel, when she looked at you, like you were the only one in the room. I was already thinking about my apartment, about how close it was, about whether I could casually mention it, when someone at the table said her name in the same breath as another name. An upperclassman, Ryan, her boyfriend. A junior in our department, someone I hadn't met yet but had already heard mentioned. Respected, established, the kind of guy that even freshmen knew not to cross. I set my cup down quietly. Of course. I told myself to let it go. She was taken, that was that. But she kept leaning over to talk to me, and I kept answering. Chapter 2. The Band. The semester started. I should have kept my distance. I didn't. We stayed in contact after orientation. Texts kept separate from the department group chats, lunches together that neither of us announced. Nothing had happened, nothing was named, but we both understood the shape of what was forming, even if we didn't look at it directly. When I found out she played in the college band, I signed up within the week. I played keys. She needed a keyboardist. It was almost too convenient to be coincidental. Band practice became my reason to be around her every day. We walked to class together. We grabbed food at the same spots. When free periods appeared and neither of us had anywhere to be, we drifted to the band room, a small, slightly cramped space tucked right next to the campus dining hall, and spent time the way only aimless college students can. Music through old speakers, naps on the beat-up couch, afternoon beers on days the room happened to be empty. The band room had one door. It did not have a lock. Chapter 3. The band room. That particular afternoon, Sarah was still in class. I was alone, stretched across the couch, staring at the ceiling while the dining hall hummed through the wall beside me. Trays clattering, muffled conversations. The ordinary sounds of 100 people who had no idea I existed. I was restless in that specific way, the kind that only happens when there's one person you want to see and they're not there yet. My phone buzzed. Her name. She asked if I'd eaten. I told her I had, that I was alone in the band room, that there was nothing going on. A pause.
I'll head over right now.
Grab some beer on the way.
How much are we talking?
Enough for 2 people with nowhere to be all afternoon. She showed up about 15 minutes later, slightly out of breath, hair a little loose, a grocery bag swinging from one hand. 2 six-packs and a bag of chips, the kind of snacks you grab when you're not really thinking about food. The upperclassmen had a rule about no drinking in the band room, but the upperclassmen were all in afternoon lectures, the hallway outside was quiet, and neither of us were in the mood to care. We set everything out on the low table and cracked open the first round like we had all the time in the world. 2 beers in, the room felt warmer. The afternoon light came through the narrow window at a low angle. She was sitting close on the couch, closer than the available space required. I leaned back and lay down first, the beer making everything soft at the edges.
Lie down here.
She said, and patted her thigh once. I didn't overthink it. I turned and rested my head in her lap, looking up at the ceiling, then at her face from below. She was looking down at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Settled and warm, but with something underneath it that I didn't have a name for yet. Her hand moved slowly through my hair, almost automatically. Outside, footsteps passed the door and continued down the hallway. I watched the shadow move under the gap at the bottom. Kept going. I exhaled. She looked beautiful from this angle. More than usual, or maybe it was the beer, or the stillness, or the specific quality of afternoon light in that room. I thought about how close her face was, about the unlocked door 6 feet away, about Ryan's name spoken at that welcome party table, easy and casual, like a boundary I was supposed to already understand. I stayed where I was. Then she said she'd never learned piano and asked if I'd teach her. I sat up, pulled the keyboard bench out, sat down, played through her requested song once from start to finish so she could hear the whole shape of it. She watched my hands the entire time without blinking. All right, I said. Come here. I'll walk you through it. She sat in front of the keyboard. I moved in behind her. There is no way to teach someone keys from a distance. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, my hands covering hers, guiding each finger to the right position. The song was slow, the kind that requires patience. Every correction meant leaning in closer, my chest against her back, my chin near her shoulder when I pointed out a specific note, our arms completely overlapping. Outside, the dining hall kept humming. Footsteps moved through the hallway in both directions. Someone slowed outside the door. I could hear the change in pace, and every muscle in my body pulled tight. The shadow under the door shifted, paused, then moved on. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. She felt it. I know because her shoulders dropped at the exact same moment, that same shared exhale of not yet, still okay. The music stopped mid-phrase. She had gone completely still. I noticed before I processed it, the absence of movement, the shift in her breathing. She turned her head slowly, just enough to look back at me over her shoulder. Her face was inches from mine. Her eyes dropped to my mouth for 1 full second, then back up. Neither of us moved. The dining hall hummed on the other side of the wall. A chair scraped somewhere beyond it. Footsteps in the hallway again, closer this time. Slowing. She kissed me. Not a question, not a test. She turned and kissed me like the decision had been made before she ever sat down at that keyboard. My mind went blank, and then immediately sharpened into one single thought. The door. The unlocked door. The footsteps that had been passing every few minutes. The dining hall full of people, one thin wall away. The upperclassmen who could finish lectures early, the students who occasionally wandered in by mistake looking for the wrong room. I kissed her back. My heart was slamming. Every few seconds my eyes pulled toward the door, the handle, the gap at the bottom, the shadow that would appear if someone stopped outside.
You keep looking at the door.
She murmured, pulling back just slightly. Because there's no lock. Anyone can walk in.
So?
So if someone comes through that door right now...
Then they come in.
I looked at her, flushed, certain. The specific expression of someone who has decided that consequences are someone else's problem. Footsteps in the hallway slowed outside our door.
Stopped.
We both froze. The handle didn't move. The shadow under the gap held still. 3 seconds, 4, 5, and then shifted and continued down the hall. I stood up. We need to go. Come back to my place. She looked at me for a moment.
Are you far from campus?
Far enough that no one we know will see us walking together.
Okay, but we're grabbing food first.
Chapter 4. The Apartment. We ate at a place a few blocks from campus. Neither of us tasted the food. She insisted on stopping at a convenience store for more beer, loading up a bag with the focused energy of someone who needs something to do with their hands. The walk to my building took about 20 minutes. The whole way I kept scanning. Classmates, upperclassmen, anyone from the department who might clock us together and remember it later. She walked beside me like she wasn't thinking about any of it. Maybe she wasn't. In the elevator, she stood next to me with the bag in her hand, and neither of us spoke. The floor numbers climbed. I could hear my own pulse.
You actually live alone here?
She asked as I put the key in the lock. Lease apartment. My parents helped set it up. She stepped inside and looked around. Real furniture. Actual kitchen. A space that was genuinely mine and not shared with anyone.
A freshman living like this.
She said quietly, almost to herself. I closed the door. Locked it. The sound of that lock clicking into place, after the unlocked band room, after every footstep in the hallway, after every frozen moment of not yet, not caught, was the first time all afternoon that I actually breathed. I kissed her before she finished turning around.
You've suddenly gotten very confident.
She laughed, pulling back just slightly. I've been waiting since the welcome party. She laughed again, but she didn't move away. Chapter 5. Every night after. That was the first night. After that, my front door became something she knew by heart. She came over almost every evening when she had nothing else going on. Always with beer, a six-pack swinging from her hand like a habit she'd stopped questioning. Shoes off at the entrance, straight to the couch. The easy, unhurried comfort of someone who had decided this place was safe. We never named what it was. Never talked about Ryan. He existed the way a weather forecast exists. Somewhere in the background, technically relevant. Not something you look at directly when you're warm and comfortable where you are. But the world doesn't disappear just because you stop checking it. One evening she was stretched out on my couch, her phone face down on the cushion when it buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her whole body shifted, just slightly, just enough. She picked it up.
Hey.
Completely level. Not a trace.
No, I'm just at a friend's place. We're watching something.
I watched her from across the room. She didn't look at me once. Her voice didn't waver.
I'll be home by 11. Don't wait up.
She set the phone face down again. Looked at me. Neither of us said anything. Another night. Later than she'd planned, her phone lighting up once, twice. She silenced the first call, let the second one ring out. When the third came, she sat up and I watched her face do something complicated for a few seconds before she answered.
I'm fine. I told you. I'm at Kayla's.
A pause. I could hear the voice on the other end. Not words, just tone. Tight, asking something specific.
We fell asleep. I'm leaving now.
She hung up and reached for her jacket without looking at me. At the door, she turned back briefly.
I'll come by tomorrow.
She said, like it was already decided. She left. I stood in my apartment and thought about that voice on the phone. About Ryan, the upperclassman I'd never spoken to, who had no idea that the door she'd just walked out of had been a door she'd been walking through almost every evening for weeks. I should have felt something more complicated than I did. Mostly, I just waited for tomorrow. Chapter 6. The morning someone almost knew. There was one specific morning I still think about. She'd stayed later than planned. We lost track of time, and by the time either of us noticed, it was past 2 in the morning. It was easier to just stay. Safer than walking back alone at that hour. Easier than whatever phone call she'd have to make. She left early the next morning, before 7, before the building started getting busy. I walked her down to the lobby. At the entrance, we nearly walked directly into a guy from our department. He was coming back from an early run. Earbuds in, face still flushed from the cold. He pulled one earbud out when he spotted me. "Oh, you live here?" "Yeah," I said. "Just moved in at the start of the semester." His eyes moved to Sarah, just for a second. She was standing slightly behind me, jacket not fully zipped, hair not quite settled. The specific appearance of someone who hadn't arrived that morning. He looked back at me. "Ah," he said. Just that. "Ah." He put his earbud back in and pushed through the door. She grabbed my arm the moment he was outside.
Does he know Ryan?
"I don't know."
Does he know him well?
I didn't answer. We stood in the lobby for a moment, neither of us moving. The elevator hummed somewhere above us.
It's fine.
She said finally. She almost sounded like she meant it. Chapter 7. The Show and the Call. The band's end-of-semester show went well, better than any of us expected. The after-party that followed was the kind of drinking that only happens when performance adrenaline needs somewhere to go. I drank too much. I don't know the exact moment it crossed over, but at some point the room started tilting, and then I remember very little. And then I was in a hospital bed staring at a ceiling that wasn't mine, with an IV in my arm and a doctor speaking to me in careful, measured sentences. Tuberculosis. I was transferred to a larger hospital in the city. Tests, isolation, a room that was mine but not mine. I lay there feeling cut off from everything. From the university, from the band, from the apartment with the locked front door, from every evening that had quietly become the thing I looked forward to most. I was drifting somewhere between sleep and awake when my phone rang. Her name on the screen. She found out I'm here. She's calling to check on me. I answered. The voice was not hers. Male. Low. The specific flatness of someone whose anger has been sitting long enough to turn cold. "Ryan." "So you're the freshman." I didn't respond. She told me, all of it, your apartment, every night. The hospital sounds filled the silence around me. Monitors, distant footsteps, a PA announcement somewhere down the hall. I know everyone in that department. The professors, the upperclassmen. By the time you come back, I will have made sure that... Here is what nobody tells you about being 20 years old, lying in a hospital bed, freshly diagnosed with tuberculosis, with a semester-long secret already burning. There is a specific kind of calm that comes when you realize you have nothing left to protect. I waited until he finished. Then, she came to me, every single night, with beer. She knocked on my door every time. Silence. The first time, she kissed me, in the band room. I didn't move first. You need to watch what you're... She called. She came over. She stayed. Every time. So if you're looking for somewhere to point this, I'd think carefully about the direction. I heard him take one sharp breath. And I'm taking a medical leave of absence. Doctor's recommendation. Long-term treatment. So whatever you're planning, there's no one here to aim it at. A long silence. The line went dead. Chapter 8. After. I took the leave. Spent the following months in treatment, slowly and methodically getting better. When the doctors finally cleared me, I was healthier than I'd been in years. I didn't go back to that university. I studied, retook the entrance exams, got into a better school in the city. I'm in my 30s now. Desk job, different city. A life that looks nothing like that band room with the unlocked door. Nothing like the elevator with the numbers climbing. Nothing like standing in a lobby watching someone's face do something unreadable before the earbud went back in. But sometimes, on quiet evenings that carry a particular kind of warmth, I find myself going back there. Not with regret. More like turning something over in your hands and feeling the weight of it. Remembering that it was real, that it happened, that for a few months, every evening felt like it was building towards something that couldn't last, and we both knew it, and neither of us stopped. I miss being 20. Just a little. I miss afternoons that felt like they'd never end. That's where this story ends. Thank you for listening. If this stayed with you, subscribe, leave a like, and turn on notifications. See you in the next one.